At 16, I met the person I was going to marry, but I had no idea he would be our neighbor's son. He was 19, and our families lived next door to each other. Because we were neighbors, almost every day he used to see me coming home from my summer job. Then I was always at home babysitting my younger siblings. Before he ever said 2 words to me, he was telling his family that I was going to be his wife someday. My mother had 4 children, and her boyfriend lived with us. My mother and her boyfriend seemed to argue all the time, and sometimes he became abusive towards her. One night, things got bad between our mother and her boyfriend, and I had to run next door and call the cops. The cops came and took him to jail. This encounter with having to use our neighbor's phone is how I met my future husband. I became best friends with his sisters and fell in love with his whole family. His parents had been married for over 30 years, and they had what I will call a real family compared to how I grew up. He had a large family, and his family was well known throughout the entire city. He was extremely popular, and I became part of his family very quickly. I was the next door neighbor's quiet, homebody teenage daughter, with whom he thought was marriage material. He would tell his male cousins that I was the type of girl that you marry and make a home with, not those girls that were out there in every guy's face trying to be cute. Even though we were young, we had a nice friendship, and that led us to start dating. He was always there to keep me company whenever my mother would leave me to look after my younger siblings, which was often. My younger brothers loved him because he would play with them and keep them active. But I was not allowed to be a teenager because my mother expected me to care for her children instead. My mother did not seem to have a problem with me dating at age 16 to an older young man, because all she could see is that he was there helping to take care of her children. We dated for about a year and a half when I found out I was pregnant with our son. So at 17, I was going to have a baby. My mother was happy that she was going to be a grandmother. I believe that she was happy because I was going to be a teenage mom, and this would require me to have to continue to live with her, which in turn would allow me to continue to look after my siblings. So a couple months after I turned 18, I gave birth to our son via C-section. My baby's father was the first to see him. My son's father became the best father to his first child. He was so helpful and a total on-hands dad. As the months grew, my son's dad was so proud he had a son that he would take our son everywhere. Eventually, we were planning our wedding. His parents wanted us to get married at their home. So by the time our wedding date arrived, our son was walking, and he was going to be our ring bearer. We had a large wedding with lots of people in attendance at my future in-laws' house. We had already moved into an apartment right before our wedding. After our wedding day, we settled into our new married family life. As our son was getting older, we decided to never have him in daycare. So I worked a day shift and he worked a night shift. Our shifts overlapped by about 45 minutes. So we would take our son over to my mom's house for those 45 minutes. Everything was going great for months. I had my own happy little family. My husband was a great father, and he treated me like a queen at home. He loved to cook, and he kept a clean house. I had great in-laws, and even my mother and I was getting along. Everything felt good. Then one day, I got a phone call from this lady that I call my second mom. She asked me to stop by her house when I got off of work because she wanted to talk to me. So after work, I drove over to her house. Once I got there, she started to tell me a story about how she found out that her daughter's boyfriend was still living with his wife instead of being separated as he had told her daughter he was. She said when she told her daughter this information, her daughter was not mad at her boyfriend for deceiving her, but her daughter got mad at her for telling her this information. Then she asked me how I felt about being told this type of information. Would I want someone to tell me, or would I rather be kept in the dark? I stated that I would want to be told, instead of walking around with a deceiving boyfriend. Well, her next words completely rocked me to my core. She informed me that my mother contacted her and asked her to talk to me because she found out that my husband was having an affair with her neighbor's young daughter, and the girl was pregnant with his child. My mom's neighbor had a son that was friends with my husband. Every day that my husband was going over to my mom's to take our son for those 45 minutes before I was to pick him up, apparently he started coming over to my mom's house early to drop off our son. He was going over to the neighbor's house, stating he was over there visiting his buddy. So of course, I was totally devastated. I did not tell him where I got my information, but I questioned him and he denied it. Then I went over and asked the girl, and she denied it also. Even denied being pregnant. I told her that she will not be able to hide a pregnancy, and I will find out the truth. I told him that if it is true, our marriage will be over, because this means he started an affair after we were married and got someone pregnant after only being married for 6 months. Well, months went by, and of course, I find out that she is indeed expecting a baby. And the baby is due 2 months after our first wedding anniversary. Once again, they both denied an affair and denied that he was the father. I once again informed him that if that child turns out to be his, we are over. So I remained in my marriage due to both of their denials. Then our first year wedding anniversary came around, and we had a small family celebration, but I was not happy. Every time I would go over to pick up my son from my mom's house, I would happen to see this girl and her belly was getting bigger and bigger. It hurt, wondering if she was carrying my husband's child. Both were still denying any type of an affair, and they both denied him being the father of her unborn child. So now, her due date was inching closer and closer, and I was consistently letting him know that our marriage will be over if the child is his. Well, the baby came a little early, and I went down to the hospital to see for myself. When I arrived at the hospital and looked at her baby through the newborn nursery window, the newborn baby girl looked more like my husband than my son did, whom was his firstborn. My husband knew I was going to the hospital to see the baby. So when I arrived back home, he had his head down because he could not look at me in my face. From that point, our marriage was over. He moved out the next day and in with his parents. Apparently, his family knew about the baby being his, and even tried to get him to be honest with me. But he chose to lie to the end. I eventually filed for a divorce after only being married for 1 year, which he contested. But our divorce was finalized several months later. Miss B, was I wrong for getting married so young to a young man that had not lived his life yet? Having a baby, then getting married at such a young age does bring on a little more of a challenge between two young adults that were just teenagers. So the answer to that is based upon your feelings at the time of this deception. He knew he was wrong in having an affair right after getting married. You were the one that was in this marriage, and no one can tell you how to feel. So only you can answer that question.